Good morning, everybody. We're going to record this conversation today. Hope you don't mind. Sam has agreed to talk a little bit about a major project he's been involved with. It relates to some of the conversations we've had over the last year or two or three. And I'm going to just let you take it from here, Sam. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself. If you have a question during the presentation, feel free to raise your hand virtually or just start yelling. Because we are recording, if I don't mute you, you will show up even if there's like a little background noise. So just mute yourself if you can, and I'll do the same right now. Sam, thank you so much for sharing this story.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Leroy. This, I want you to know, is a presentation that I've been working on with a couple other fellows that are involved with the Rouge Gateway Project. And we're planning to do a presentation to the steering committee for the Great Lakes Way, which I may have mentioned to you. I can't remember for sure, but this is an initiative in Southeast Michigan along the St. Clair River and along Lake St. Clair, and then down the Detroit River, that's being championed by the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. And I'll, I think I'll go ahead and share a screen here just to. So really what we're talking about today is this is kind of a dry run. It's still a draft presentation, and I'll be working with, like I mentioned, Paul Draus and Herman Jenkins that will join me on Friday to give this presentation to the Great Lakes Way Steering Committee, which I'm a part of, by the way. So we've been working on this. Can you see this screen by chance? Does that show up? Okay, good. As I mentioned, it's a really pretty prominent idea from Lake Huron down to Lake Erie, which it's both a greenway and a blueway, and it has a number of cultural and natural features along the way, which are all shown here on this vision map. So I don't want to get into too much detail about this, but please know it's I think kind of representative of what Detroit's been going through in the last 10 years. It's really a regional approach, trying to bring partners from surrounding communities, not just the city of Detroit, but reaching out to the suburban areas and to kind of revision what Southeast Michigan can be as a whole, not just each municipality individually, and not only Michigan, but how this thing doesn't really show up on this map. But if you go online and look at what's happening with the Great Lakes Way Initiative, there's a lot of emphasis with the Gordie Howe Bridge and a new pedestrian trail or passageway on that bridge that would connect to Ontario. And of course, they've been working on a trail system for years, so we would be tying right into an international trail system. And I guess I want to make sure I mentioned too here, this is part of this. The lower end of it is the Iron Belt Trail. Iron Belt Trail is a walking trail and I'm gonna try to throw that on the screen if I can. Yeah, I had it here somewhere. Okay. Backing out a little bit. This Iron Belt Trail, if you're familiar with it, goes from Belle Isle to Ironwood in the Upper Peninsula. So, it's two trails, a hiking trail and a biking trail. But in reality, hiking and biking is pretty much allowed on both. It's not, you don't just hike on one or bike on the other. They're in essence, it's two trails. So a good chunk of the Great Lakes Way is also the Iron Belt Trail, which I think could be easily tied into in Ingham County, right in this area. Maybe you guys are already planning this, I'm not sure. But I know there's in looking at some of the maps, there is a proposed trail that goes down M52 to Stockbridge. And certainly there's one out here along the along Grand River. But this would tie Hazlitt, Okemos, East Lansing, you know, the whole Ingham County area into this regional trail system, which you know, gets right down to Detroit. You know, down, this is the not only this is the Iron Belt Trail, but then there's this downriver linked greenway initiative, which ties in all these downriver communities. So I mean, this is, you know, thinking regionally, I think it'd be something that Meridian Township, maybe you're already looking into this, but to me, this is a pretty important link right here coming down to Stockbridge. So that's that part. That's the Great Lakes Way. And what I really wanted to talk about to you today is this Rouge Gateway Project. Wendy, I know you're familiar with this. This has been kicking around for quite some time. And as I mentioned, Paul Draus from U of M Dearborn and Herman Jenkins, who's the trail manager for Friends of the Rouge, will be joining me on Friday to give this. So it's still a little rusty, but we'll get it good by Friday, hopefully. Let's see if I can go to screen share. Yeah. Okay. So the Rouge Gateway, first of all, is this lower end of the Rouge River, beginning at the confluence of tributaries. Okay, so there's the upper, middle, and lower Rouge, which basically, I mean, this is all of Wayne County and up into Oakland County. So there's something like 33 different communities that border on the Rouge, which was a terribly degraded river, and well, still has its issues, but is improved significantly in the last 20 years based on this Rouge River wet weather demonstration project, which basically dumped close to $1 billion or $500 million into improving the river, mainly with a lot of combined sewer overflow removal, a lot of green infrastructure improvements, a lot of education. This is the demonstration project funded the Friends of the Rouge for probably 15 years, who did a lot of outreach to the community and really informed the community about the quality of the river and how it could be improved. So the Rouge Gateway Project, by the way, that was also funded with a little bit of chump change from this bigger project. And Wayne County and U of M Dearborn basically were the champions, but they partnered as the co-champions of the project. But it involved all the businesses, all the municipalities along this area. This is Melvindale, others, let's see, well, of course, Dearborn, River Rouge, and all of the state stakeholders, you know, at that time it was MDEQ, the DNR, of course. So everybody was involved. In the early phases, in the analysis phase, the river was recognized to be pretty compartmentalized. Okay, what I mean by that is there was kind of a natural area up by U of M Dearborn, and then this cultural area, which kind of overlapped because of the U of M Dearborn campus, but of course, Henry Ford Community College, or the Henry Ford, which is of course Greenfield Village, and the Henry Ford Museum. You get into the whole cultural history of the area here. The urban river, which was a lot of Ford offices, along the river here, and then it got very industrial down at the mouth of the river. This is the Fort Rouge plant and many other industries along the way. So pretty compartmentalized. And what we try to do is take from each of those zones the good stuff. Okay, so from the natural river, the whole idea of environmental stewardship, the cultural river, certainly all the great cultural heritage that exists in this region. In the urban river, people wanting to recreate, there was some recreation in the urban area, and maybe to expand that. And then, of course, economic development out of the industrial river. This whole area really drove Michigan's economy for the better part of the last couple hundred years. So a lot of money made right in this little pocket. But the idea is to not just redo these ideas in their each zone, but to spread those good things across the board. So coming up with projects that would include these concepts in each project to help make that. And that's the idea behind this graphic is, color wise, they just start to blend. So you get environmental stewardship, cultural heritage and recreation, and economic development bleeding across the whole gateway. So that's the concept for the plan. And it was a catalog of a whole several different projects. I mean, actually a multitude of different projects, and these are just some of them that were in the master plan that I'm highlighting here. But bank stabilization at a hairpin turn in the river, and recreating the dredging and recreating an oxbow. You have to understand the Rouge River was put into a concrete channel by the Army Corps of Engineers for flood protection. And if you look closely, there's all these little meanders that were cut off due to the channel construction. Fortson Island, this was a little meander. And even before that, Henry Ford, this is the original river here. Henry Ford dredged a channel from the Detroit River, widened the whole thing, and then this turning basin for the Rouge plant. So this river has seen a lot of damage, not only in reshaping and channelizing, but also, then dumping of industrial waste and combined sewer overflows. Is just a real mess here, certainly 20 years ago. But of course, with the Clean Water Act, the dumping of industrial waste has pretty much gone away. At least it has to be permitted now, of course. And then a lot of combined sewer overflows have been eliminated. There's still a few, but it's made significant improvements to a point where it was basically dead. It was on fire over 50 years ago. There was a serious fire in the Rouge, and there was no oxygen in the river, basically nothing living. And today, the dissolved oxygen is to a point where fish can survive. There's over 100 species of fish that live in the Rouge, and people are now kayaking and canoeing in the lower end of the Rouge. So a lot of progress made since in the last 20 years, really. Some big projects, like I mentioned, the redredging and reconnecting of the former Oxbow at Greenfield Village. This is now along that channel, a place where fish can at least get out and rest, and there's spawning and nursery habitat as well. So it's a significant environmental improvement. This doesn't seem like much, but the green roof at the Ford truck plant I think it's been said that it's the largest green roof in the United States. So a significant improvement there, as well as bioswales along Miller Road, which this area was just at one time solid roofs. Oh, and Wendy, you were involved in this project, right? With the green roof, is that correct? You might have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was involved in all of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, Ford was committed to staying in Dearborn and really reinventing their roots being the Rouge plant. And they did that 13-acre green roof was the biggest, or 10-acre green roof. And then we had, 13 acres of pervious pavement. We basically introduced in the 1,200 acres of the Rouge plant, and at that time it was Rouge Steel. It's gone through a few other owners, but we introduced essentially 100 acres of green, whether it was green and sustainable, whether it was porous pavement, green roofs, bioswales, prairies, greening down the middle of Miller Road, which was kind of unheard of prior
right.
to that. That was a big landmark. We introduced stormwater management that at that point wasn't even required. I mean, it kind of blows my mind thinking back. This was not 25 years, but more than 20 years ago. And
Right.
everything has changed so much. Like Dearborn, when we first started working there, they were not required any stormwater management. But that was not necessarily good for them either, because this place was so flat, their buildings would flood. So yeah, it's gone through a lot of change since we did all this work.
You're absolutely right. And thanks for jumping in on some of those details. In fact, I think, Wendy, this is probably where we were first introduced to each other.
Right.
When I was with Hamilton Anderson working on this master plan, but Ford was a significant stakeholder in that plan. And I mean, they just took off. They just took in with the help of you and some of the other firms that you were working with. A lot of work. Wayne County, and this is what this was a big deal to get Wayne County on board with a green infrastructure along Miller Road. That was a huge step. So several other big ideas that came out of this master plan. Of course, a trail that would connect all of the communities along the way. A first phase of it was constructed. This is this green area next to U of M Dearborn and Henry Ford Community College that was highly protected by environmentalists. And they were very, very concerned about trails penetrating through this forest. We did choose, the path of least destruction, the narrowest areas, but the whole idea was to get people into this woods and let them engage with it, which basically helps perpetuate the forest by them taking ownership and understanding its importance. More people now are all about protecting this green area, but of course, trails, as everyone knows, the whole idea of interconnectivity for the communities is a great thing as well. This concrete channel was recognized that maybe we could do some removal of a portion of it. And then this Fort Rouge area, basically that's Fort Street and the Rouge River. There's big opportunities for greenway connections, which we'll get into in a moment. But the trail now this is the first phase under construction that was completed, and then phase 2 is now in construction documents with the help of the Ralph Wilson Foundation. Funding for that is in place for certainly the documents, and I think a good chunk of construction is also pretty much the funding is found for it. Without Herman Jenkins here today, I don't know all the details. He'll be filling in on that portion of it on Friday, as well as where we are with design development for the rest of the trail going all the way down to the Detroit River. So progress is being made in that area. And of course, with the Friends of the Rouge, they have now conceptualized a water trail that goes from the city of Wayne, that's off the map over here, beginning at the far west end of the lower Rouge, and then coming down the Gateway area through the industrial zone, which is a whole new experience for kayaking. You know, when you think of kayaking, you're in a pristine river up north, but paddling alongside a freighter is a whole nother experience. So this concrete channel restoration is also being looked at by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Environmental Protection, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but it was originally conceptualized to actually remove this concrete channel down to below normal water level and then restore the whole concrete bank. But due to climate change and a lot of extensive HEC-RAS modeling, there's concern if this would be done that we could go back into a flood situation. This was obviously built to prevent flooding. Basically, you know, when we get a heavy rain, it just flushes down to the Detroit River. But when you start taking that out, the friction that would be caused by natural features would create some backwater into some of the built areas along the way. So we're into a little different plan as of today, which has been looked at extensively by EPA and Army Corps of Engineers over the last 2 years. You know, this just again, as Wendy mentioned, this goes back almost 25 years when we were visually, you know, envisioning this, but just lately plans have been developed to break into that channel at various locations. This is the wetland developed at Area 2, a lot of upland habitat restoration where we can't do much of anything else except for build the trail, and then recreate some of these other oxbows similar to what was done at Greenfield Village, you know, breaking those back into the channel, creating more habitat area, you know, nursery and spawning areas and areas where the fish can get out of the channel and rest before they make their way up to the natural river once you get past Michigan Avenue up in this area. So there's some good things happening. It's not exactly what was conceptualized, but certainly will make a huge difference with the greening along the way, you know, landscape habitat restoration, prairie development, forest development, the trail for people to walk, of course. Area 2, we would be breaking in to the channel, as I mentioned, and of course, deepening some of these low areas, dredging them out, creating deep water habitat, structures for fish to hide, and vernal pools, and little side paths. You know, there's the main route along the way, but then little side paths into these natural areas with educational interpretation signage. So these are huge improvements, recreational improvements for this urban area, and you know, down all the way to Detroit, which are very accessible for the inner city area of Detroit, the neighborhoods of downtown Detroit. So these are all sort of similar. I don't want to go into too much detail, but you know, recreating these oxbows that were cut off from the river, inaccessible for fish, but will now be accessible for, again, nursery and spawning. Kind of get the general idea there. And of course, the Gateway Trail, which is in design development now, and with the backing of the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation, a lot of hope is there for this trail to be completed within the near future. I mean, certainly within the next 5 or 10 years. I'm optimistic this would happen. So we get to this Fort Rouge area, which I mentioned is a very important intersection, not only for trails, but for green infrastructure. And if you think about, we've talked about this in some of our meetings before, green infrastructure being these corridors for wildlife, birds and small mammals to travel within a pretty urban area, and certainly Detroit, the most, and Southwest Detroit, the most heaviest industry area in our state. To have a natural corridor through it is pretty significant. And these hubs that we've talked about, Rouge Park this is the largest green area in the city of Detroit, which there's some forested areas in there, some natural prairie areas that have been developed. This other hub at University of Michigan, Dearborn, newly created hub at the Oxbow at the Henry Ford. And down here at this intersection that we're talking about, we've got a cemetery, Woodmere Cemetery, one of the larger ones in the Detroit area, which is a heavy tree canopy. And then what's being developed south of the river, we'll get into, is this Marathon Gardens area. So a significant green hub could be created right at this trail intersection. So that's something to be thinking about. And this is why this area has been celebrated with the development of 4th Street Bridge Park, which happens to be selected by the Great Lakes Way Committee as one of the cultural destinations along the Great Lakes Way vision map. Okay, the blue, the Blue Way and the Green Way that follows the Detroit River in this area. So this 4th Street Bridge Park has been in the Gateway Master Plan for, again, 20 years, and just in the last couple of years was completed. It was planned simultaneously with this new bridge that MDOT installed a couple of years ago, which basically changed the whole character of the area. These historical bridges, this particular one was removed, and this new contemporary bridge was put in, which when it opens up, instead of 2 panels, opening from the middle, it's one giant panel that is just pulled up from one side. So the whole thing it towers over the river. It's kind of a sightseeing amenity in itself, just to see the bridge open. But as this was being planned, the stakeholder group was really adamant about salvaging parts of the old bridge to use in features of the park. So, central sculpture was conceptualized. The interpretive signage was thought to be supported by some of the salvaged pieces of the park as well. But basically, it's just a kind of a vest pocket park where people can gather, very environmentally conscious, a lot of porous pavement, rain garden areas. And then the big idea would be to have a kayak launch over here. First, porous pavement to get in and out of that, to service that kayak area as well. And a demonstration for how porous pavement works with interpretive signage. A lot of other interpretive signage that tells the story of the Rouge River and the industry of the area as well. So there's a lot going on in a very small space. Stakeholders finally raised the money with the help of the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation to basically complete the fundraising campaign. And here you can see some of the elements that were salvaged from the former park, or from the former bridge. And along this one little area along this little central fountain that can be activated with a push of a button. These little frogs will also spit out a little stream of water to people can watch it disappear in the porous pavement. And that's all talked about with signage next to the area about how porous pavement works. So it's pretty amazing how after 20 years, these concept plans turn into reality. So Friends of the Rouge are now working with the PEA group to finalize plans for the second phase And this would be the kayak launch, and again, with the help of the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation. That's probably not too far off. Just across the street from the area, they constructed a gateway to the downriver linked greenways. This is again part of the Great Lakes Way vision and the Iron Belt Trail that heads to the downriver communities. Here's the park, the bridge over the river, the new bridge, the new 4th Street Bridge Park. And this was just completed, the Downriver Link Gateway. There are sharrows in the street to get you down this busy trafficked Fort Street. But there is plans for an off-road trail that would meander through what's called Marathon Gardens. Marathon, when they expanded about 6 years ago, as a effort to appease the community, offered to buy the properties in Oakwood Heights, because people weren't really excited about the expansion of Marathon, but these properties were terribly run down, terribly degraded, and it really gave a lot of people an opportunity to move to a much better environment. And we'll talk about their vision plan in a moment, but this new path would go right through the Group Marathon Garden area into a urban farm area that's just getting off the ground as well, and a potential pavilion for the public. This is all would be Marathon improvements for the community. So this is about 100-acre neighborhood that Marathon offered to buy homes, to buy their homes, with the idea of creating wildlife refuge, some new wetlands, some urban farming, urban forests, and a lot of education opportunities. This is our little nucleus of already built improvements, the 4th Street Bridge, the park, and the gateway. And you can see what's happened. This was 15 years ago, an aerial view of the neighborhood, and is pretty much transitioned into green space, with probably almost 90% of those homes purchased and removed. And at some point, the idea would be to start to remove some of the road infrastructure as well. Other improvements in that area, I didn't mention too much about it, but this is Fortson Island, another meander that was cut off by the dredging that Henry Ford did. This has opportunity to become a recreational area as well. Certainly has some contamination issues, but EPA is working on that to remove the contaminants in this back channel and along the lower Rouge. A lot of work has already been done with removing the debris. A stakeholder group was with Friends of the Rouge involved, Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision was involved, several others, to remove a lot of boats and automobiles, other structures that were unidentifiable, but this area has been significantly cleaned up. As I mentioned, there's still some contaminated sediments, but work is is underway to take care of that as well. Invasive species removal, a lot of phragmite. He said that a lot of work has been done by Wayne County to get rid of that as well. But this is kind of what the properties look like, and with Marathon's help, those have been removed in this area, and we're starting to visualize this could actually be, once the contaminants are removed. We got this marine debris removal project, the abandoned home removal, the contaminated sediment removal. Combined, we can have healthy fishing and recreational opportunities. So, I mean, it's still a ways off, but huge progress is being made. This is the corner of the area where Marathon has been working with forest restoration, the Oxbow area, And over several years have been doing a lot of planting with volunteer help, both their own staff and neighborhood volunteers. This house has since been removed since 2015. So this is a blank slate. And these trees are really starting to grow now. Habitat's coming back. We've got turtles using the areas. There were some turtle nesting areas constructed and some snake hibernacula constructed, but we're even seeing evidence of beaver in the area. So big changes. Eagles are flying over the overhead as well. And this is the beginning of the urban farming area in that area. Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision. These are all nonprofit groups that are really working together in Detroit to make things better. Very, very much a regional approach, as I mentioned earlier, with the help of industry. So things have really turned around. Here's the master plan for Marathon Gardens. This is the Oxbow area we were mentioning, and this is pretty much built or planted a forest in this area right now. But the idea is to extend that forest all the way down to basically create a bit of a windbreak and catchment for other air contaminants in the air, particles in the air that are from westerly breezes would blow across to this direction, hopefully could be caught by the forest. And then a string of natural prairie in here, some wetlands. Of course, prairie will bring the pollinators. And then here's the idea for urban forestry in here and over here, saving Oakwood Boulevard, which is still a valid retail corridor with Andiamo's restaurant in here, and I believe a vegetable distribution area. So in theory, we could be growing vegetables and wheeling them in for salad at Andiamo's restaurant, and into the vegetable distribution area. So it's all set up for that as time goes on. And I guess that's the last slide. So there we have it. That's sort of a real quick dialogue of what the Rouge River was, basically on fire 50 years ago, to people now recreating in it based on a lot of effort by a lot of people. So sure, if there's questions.
Thank you so much, Sam. What an interesting project, and cool that you're so involved with it still, and so much is happening now. Sarah's got a question.
I have multiple questions, so I'll probably send you an email so I don't take up the whole time.
Okay.
So the $500 million is covering all of this?
Well, the $500 million, that was the bigger project. That was the Rouge River Wet Weather Demonstration Project.
Okay.
And that was a federal grant that Wayne County, Jim Murray championed that one from Wayne County. And it was really mostly spent on combined sewer overflow elimination. That's where the $500 million or $500 million was spent. This project, the master plan, was like about $100,000, and that was planning work that lasted almost 10 years. It was a living plan that, Hamilton Anderson worked with this multi-headed stakeholder group for years, extracting ideas from them and drawing up little sketches to help people visualize what was happening. The construction of it was that's a whole separate thing. The trail, as I mentioned, up by U of M Dearborn, that was mostly funded by MDOT, a TAP grant. So the construction of these pieces was completely separate from the $1 billion.
So who was the organizing body that said, was it because of the Rouge on Fire? Like, who was the organizing body that said some master plan needs to be created? How did that, who was the one that said, we need to get stakeholders involved to get this going?
That would have been an individual named Ed Begale, who he's passed away. He was a a representative from U of M Dearborn, trying to think of his title. He was basically Wendy, do you recall what his title was? I'm blanking out on that, but he basically was the guy that went to Lansing to get money for U of M Dearborn. And he was very influential in the community. He recognized the need for something to happen, and he got Wayne County on board. So that was his first deal, is to partner up with Wayne County, and they together with some of their influence over the industries, Ford fell in line. They were one of the biggest industrial partners. And once you get a few people on board, then the industries all along the lower Rouge came to the table.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
As well as the communities, Melvindale and Dearborn, the mayors all would come to these meetings.
And that was it. In what decade was that when that started?
It started at the tail end of the last century, like 98, 99.
Okay, thank you.
And it went for 10 years of meeting until the economy basically collapsed.
Mhm.
Wendy, it's an honor that you're here as well. Did you want to add anything to Sam's little spiel there of how it all started?
Sam did such an incredible job presenting this. It was a really fun and insightful period of time too. I was involved primarily from the Ford point of view, from the Ford Rouge, and I will say though that this initiative just honestly is still lasting. I mean, they're still doing great things to green up and make improvements to all of these areas. I think, I don't know, I always like to say Ford really got on board with LEAD, which we've talked about. They were one of the first partners that got involved with LEAD, and that really had a big impact on everything they were doing in Dearborn. Obviously, I'm a Ford champion. I've done so much work with them. But yeah, it's exciting for me to see this today because I haven't been involved as much with this, but it's good to see that this project that started 20 some years ago is still just humming along and doing great things. And, I guess, I think we're in a much better period of awareness and engagement and health of the environment and all of that. And I mean, I like to say projects like this really started it all. And this is such a good demonstration of, grassroots involvement as well as communities and in industry.
Thank you. Sarah had probably more questions, but anyone who's got something, feel free. We've got about 15 more minutes and been fascinating so far. I'm certainly interested in this idea of how do ideas become reality and not always work out the way you originally expect, and how do we work together to see some of these things happen over time.
Hey, Sam, I've got more of a comment than a question. I grew up downriver, and most of what I know about the Rouge River is, from freeway overpasses. And I've lived up in this area now probably 40 years, but just to profess my ignorance, for the longest time, I never realized there was an actual river there. The area was so industrialized that you never saw water. And I think it's just amazing what they're doing now to bring that back.
Yeah, you're right in this. It's not very visible because even when you're on these bridges, for the most part, the railings kind of screen the river from you. You don't see it too much. And the river has always been thought to be, something that was poisoned. You don't want to touch it. And it was never, people were never invited to come to the river. And that was some, I'll mention real quickly, this area in some of these riverfront improvements that we didn't talk about in the presentation, but there was a project that one of the Ford subsidiaries, can't think of their name, that was building a new office complex here. They had plans to do just like everybody had always done, and that would be to put the parking lot on the river, and the front of the building would face out toward, Oakwood and this area. Well, we did a quick sketch for them that flipped the whole idea and put the parking lot away from the river in front of the building on the river and showed improvements along the river. So they've been, and they were under construction building this thing, and they stopped and redid their construction drawings and flipped their building around and put the parking lot on the opposite side. And so then they've been sitting there for 20 years waiting for this river to be restored, because of these great visionary ideas. So they're the front of the building was facing the concrete channel, but things are starting to happen now. It's here 30 years later, things are finally starting to happen.
I'm curious if you know when they were buying back the properties and stuff, if that went well in terms of it being kind of an environmental justice. Those homes had been on property that was near a contaminated river. If those people felt good about that, having their property being bought from them, when highways were put in and the properties were bought from them to put a highway in, that did not go well or was not seen as good. I was wondering if this was seen as a good thing because it was helping the river. And do you know any of that? How that went over?
It's sort of sensitive, let me tell you, because Marathon was certainly 20 years ago or 10 years ago, maybe, Marathon was perceived as, a problem in the community based on contamination. It's a dirty industry, right? And they actually look worse than they are because they have this huge infrastructure, and they're blowing out a lot of steam that looks like smoke, and it's really not as bad as what it looks, but it has a bad appearance. And when they wanted to expand, the community, was in an uproar. That was just something that nobody wanted to see, is Marathon expanding their footprint. And they weren't going to expand into this neighborhood, but this neighborhood, let me tell you, was already severely degraded. Probably at least 2/3 of the homes were burned out. And, where the people did live, it was a bad situation. Drugs were prolific. It was probably one of the worst areas to live in Detroit. Nothing like what you see in Lansing, believe me. But still, and this is what it goes. It's everything you can think of when you talk about underprivileged neighborhoods. They're trapped. They're surrounded by. You might have another image here that I can show you. Yeah. So this is kind of tough to read, but Oakwood Heights here. So here's Marathon, the Detroit wastewater treatment plant, which, believe me, that place has a strong fragrance. And here's the Rouge. These neighborhoods are just wedged in between some of the heaviest industry in the state, and very tough places to live. So this was not a quality neighborhood, Oakwood Heights, by any means. But the idea of them buying homes it wasn't so much them buying homes, it was their expansion over here that people were against. The people that actually benefited from the buyout, they were paid way more than their house was worth, and they were able to find a much better place to live. So it was really a great thing that they did for the neighborhood, but at the same time, it was a double-edged sword because Marathon did this expansion. I don't know how, if that makes sense, but it was a tough thing. Maybe Wendy, if you've got some background on that, you might add to that story.
Yeah, I know not about this area where you're talking, but more about Del Rey.
Yeah.
Because it was a similar sort of situation where very degraded,
Mhm.
Terrible place to live. The mayor of Detroit wanted all of the homes bought out, and they didn't want people to live there because it was just so polluted. And that initiative started because of the bridge, the Gordie Howe Bridge that they were putting in. And like Sam said, a lot of them were able to find better places to live. But the flip side of that was that Del Rey was a really close-knit neighborhood, and not everybody wanted to move. And, they wanted to stick together because they were like family to each other. So yeah, it's a tough thing, for sure. And I guess, people just need to be really sensitive when they undertake initiatives like that and listen to the people.
That's a good point. Even in Oakwood Heights, there's people there that still live there that didn't take the buyout, and now they're living in a park. They love it. So they're not going anywhere. They think they're living in like they're living up north or something. So it's the people that stayed. It's good for them as well. And eventually, this isn't going to happen next week, but as those people pass on, whether or not they have family that's going to take over their home, I would guess at some point there would be a time where most of that area would become available to actually remove some of the street infrastructure. And not all of it, but most of the homes up here are gone now anyway, as I mentioned. So we could start to be taking out some of the road infrastructure.
Well, we have a time for a couple more comments, or if you have unrelated updates, now's a good time to share. Last week, we heard a little bit about the green burial. But if you've got any thing you want to share, feel free to pipe in. And thank you, Sam and Wendy, for not just the presentation, but all the work that's gone into this and inspiration for our region.
You're welcome.
Is an inspiration, thanks. And I wanted to be sure everyone saw in the chat, Tri-County is working on connecting our trails throughout Ingham, Clinton, and Eaton counties to our statewide networks, which includes that linkage in Stockbridge of the Iron Bell Trail. We just had the Ingham County meeting, but I included a link to 2 meetings tomorrow, actually, in Clinton and Eaton counties. So that's exciting news. I am curious, completely separately related, if anyone has attended the Adopt a River in recent years. I just haven't attended, and I'm excited, and I'm wondering what's in store, if exhibitors are inside or outside, and how much you interacted with the public when there. Has anybody attended that event recently? It's on May 13th.
No, but I literally was coming to here to ask about that kind of thing. So May
Oh, great.
15th. Where is that at?
It's sponsored by the Board of Water and Light. They've been doing it for a really long time, like decades. But it's at Impressions 5. So if you go to either the BWL website or I-5, you'll see places to register. And folks clean up the river from 8:30 to 11, and then there's educational booths from 11 to 1 p.m. And I will be at both. Yeah,
Cool.
it's a really large community event.
My guess is that they'll make space available in Impression 5 if the weather does not
If
permit
it's,
being
that's what I
outside.
guess too, but
But don't take my word for it. That sounds like a worthwhile event.
yeah, definitely.
I've been hoping to get the canoe out fairly shortly. I just got to figure out how to put it on top of John's car. I might need a kayak. Any other comments?
Laura, you had sent out the thing about the pesticides group or whatever. I sent that to some people, and I have people that are interested in that whole concept of, there was a group in Grand Rapids and stuff, just encouraging the idea of lessening pesticides on lawns and stuff. So I don't know if there's other people interested, but I do have some people that are interested in maybe expanding that to having a group over here in Lansing, because they're just on the website that you sent, there's not a group here. So
Yeah, I can maybe hook you up with that person if you haven't already hooked up.
okay, thank you.
That's
Yeah.
definitely a topic that interests me too, Sarah. So thanks for thinking about that.
Any other comments in the last couple of minutes here? We have
Sorry, I don't mean to keep asking, but nobody else is asking. Is there, I'm interested in this adopted river. Are there, Amanda, maybe you are probably the best, I don't know. Are there issues, maybe not as bad, but are there issues like what River Rouge and what Sam is dealing with over here in our region? In terms of the river and cleanup, and I know that there's the fish ladder and stuff, but like, are there issues like anything near what Sam is dealing with and talking about? in Vermont?
No, we don't have the industrial pollution as much, but absolutely there are issues with the health of our rivers, especially in terms of E. coli. Oddly, pet waste is a very large problem because people don't pick it up and it goes into the storm drains and goes into our bodies of water. But we also have some causes of pollution from the large agricultural presence in our area, at least with those high E. coli levels. But no, it's not anywhere near it as what the Rouge is.
Okay, thank you.
And really, if we educate people more, which is what I'm trying to do, there are a lot of personal actions that would make a big difference.
Yeah,
thank you.
it hasn't caught on fire. The river
Right.
has not caught on fire. So you don't have that problem, and you don't have the channelization, but the certainly what you mentioned, the agricultural runoff, that if that can be addressed, that would be huge for the water quality. And that just, I mean, part of that goes together with this green buffer, all of the opportunities for forest habitat, pollinator habitat along the river, which would help solve the agricultural problem and also
Yes.
help shade the river, help cool the water. There's so many things that can be done.
And those things are really lacking, Sarah, those types of green infrastructure that would make huge improvements in our region anyway.
Yep.
I don't think people realize how much improvement the river has made in the last 50 to 60 years too, with wastewater treatment and stormwater
sure.
runoff. When you couldn't even, the river, red cedar smelled bad going through campus, and people just didn't want to be around it.
Now they want to be on it.
Anyway, thanks everybody. If you have suggestions for future speakers or dialogue topics, feel free to invite, or maybe you want to present something that's going on with you and have a conversation about it. The person that Sarah mentioned might be an interesting guest to talk about sort of the pesticide-free vision. But yeah, thanks everybody. And Wendy for tuning in too. I hope to see some of you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay,
Thanks, Sam.
goodbye. Thank you.